Running for president, yo. Okay, that was bad. Sorry. We're going to go over the different stages for running to become the president or running to become a president. Who can run? It is important to point that out. You have to be a natural born citizen of the United States, which means you either have to be born to a citizen of the United States, so your citizenship by blood, or you have to be born here on American territory. So it could be born in the continental United States, Alaska, Hawaii, or like on a naval base in a different country. And you have to be at least 35 years old, and you have to be a resident of the United States for at least 14 consecutive years. Okay, so who can run? That's taken care of. Then we're going to talk about the different stages, primaries and caucuses, the presidential national conventions, the general election, the electoral college, and we're also going to talk about paying for all of that, from primaries all the way to the general election. Okay, deciding to run. As you know, because you're working on a presidential election project, the talk about who is going to be the next presidential candidate starts pretty much after the presidential election. So in 2012, after Barack Obama was reelected, people had already started talking about who's going to be the nominee for the Democrats, who's going to be the nominee for the Republicans. So campaigns are more taxing than ever. They seem endless, and they generally start a full year before the general election date. Those who want to be a president need a electoral base or need voter support in order to even begin. Generally, you have to have name recognition, so you started off as a senator, a representative, or a governor. And that's generally how you'll get support, or vice president. So if you're looking at all of these guys, Joe Biden, Chris Christie, okay, Andrew Cuomo, they all have name recognition. What you're going to do is you're going to have an exploratory committee, and you're going to test the waters. You're going to get a feel for your potential voter, media, and financial support. So that's conducted by exploratory committee that you recruit and hire political consultants, public opinion pollsters. All of those people are going to measure who's out there that likes you. Do you have that electoral base to begin? Okay. Then you're going to announce your presidency, presidential run or presidential candidacy. So you say, I would like to be the Republican nominee for president, and this is why I think I'm going to be awesome. Or I'm going to be the Democratic candidate for president, and this is why I'm going to be awesome. Generally, the announcement for this takes place in November. November before the election. Oh, gee whiz. The election year. Okay. So almost an entire year before we actually vote for whether we want a Republican or a Democrat in place. Then you start polling and you start trying to raise money, because you're going to need a lot of money if you want to become president. How do you win the nomination? The goal is to win delegates that will support you and go to the national convention to vote for you. Okay, the national convention is a large event where delegates gather to formally select the party's candidate for the general election. Okay, so the whole idea behind primaries is to get people to show up to the Democratic or Republican National Convention and support you. Okay. The way that you win delegates to go to the National Convention and support you is to win primaries in the state levels. So states are given delegates. States are going to choose their delegates either through primary elections or caucuses. Caucuses are more of an old-fashioned way of choosing delegates for your state. Caucuses consist of a meeting of a state party or state party leaders, and they'll choose the delegates to go to the national convention. Now that's the old way. Even now when we run caucuses, like there's a caucus in Iowa and a caucus in Texas, people like me and you get to go. So it's not so much party elites, but regular people have to go to a party meeting and physically get up and vote by moving to corners of a room to show their support for particular candidates. So the way a caucus would look for the Republicans is that you would go to the gym of Smithfield High School if Virginia had caucuses. You would go to the gym of a high school and you would physically get up and move to the different corners of the gym to show your support for a particular candidate. So like you would get up and move to Chris Christie's corner, and then they would literally count who's in whose corner, and then the candidate that gets the most support wins that state's delegation. That's the old way of doing it. Not so many caucuses anymore. Primaries are more common because at one time party bosses ran the caucuses. So like your party machines like Boss Tweed, the people who used voter intimidation, they ran the caucuses. Today, caucuses are more open and more people can participate in them. But again, not really that common. Most delegates today are selected in presidential primaries. This is where voters in a state go to the polls and vote for a candidate. Presidential primaries are a product of the progressive reforms. Okay, so primaries, states use these primaries where voters essentially nominate the candidate by choosing delegates to go to the national convention on behalf of that state. There are two ways to hold primaries, and the state parties get to decide whether your primary is going to be open or closed. Open primaries, any voter can vote. You don't have to be a registered Republican to vote in the Republican primary or a registered Democrat to vote in the Democratic primary. Any voter can vote. Closed primaries, only registered party members. I'm going to put reg instead of registered. So only registered party members may participate. Now, the reason they do this, Virginia has open primaries. Some states have closed. Now, the reason you would want to have an open primary is because you can allow independents to vote in either the Democrat or Republican primaries, and they don't have to pick a side because they might be uncomfortable with that. But in closed primary states, you have to be registered Democrat or Republican if you want to participate in the primary. And what that'll do in a closed primary state, it'll prevent Democrats from going to the Republican primary and picking the worst Republican candidate that they can find, or vice versa. It will prevent Republicans from participating in the Democratic primary to try to select the worst Democratic candidate. State parties get to decide how they're going to break up their delegation, and I'm going to show you that the Republicans break up their delegates by winner take all. So whoever wins the majority of the primary vote wins all of the state's delegates. Okay, Democrats proportionally distribute their state delegates. So if you win 70% of the primary vote, then you win 70% of the Democratic state delegates. And I'm going to show you how that works, hopefully. I'm going to pull it up in 1 second. Now, I can tell you, okay, I have pulled up a primary results map. Let me see if I can't get, oh, okay, it won't adjust. All right, so what this map is through NPR, and this is a 2008 primary and caucuses results map. And the reason I'm pulling up a 2008 one is not because I want to be outdated, but because 2008 was the last time that the Republicans and the Democratic Party had to choose somebody to run for their party. Because in 2012, Obama was the automatic default nominee for the Republican Party because he was running for re-election. So let's look at Virginia, since this is U.S. VA government, essentially. Okay, so I told you that the Democrats in Virginia decide to select their delegates proportionally. And if you look, the Democrats have given the state of Virginia 83 delegates that then go to the Democratic National Convention and pledge their support for a candidate at that convention. So in our Democratic primary, Obama and Clinton were trying to get 83 pledged delegates. Obama won 64% of our primary election votes. So he got 64% of our 83 delegates, which ended up being 54 pledged delegates. So he received 64%, or that portion of our delegation. Clinton received 35% of the vote. So she received 29 pledged delegates that go on to the National Convention and voted for her to be the nominee for the Democrats. Republicans do it winner take all. McCain won 50%, or a plurality of the Virginia Republican primary votes. McCain then won all 60 of the pledged delegates that the Republican Party allocates or gives to the state of Virginia. Huckabee was pretty popular in this state. He won 41% of the vote. He gets nothing because the Republicans do it winner take all. They are starting to reform their system to make it look more like the Democrats, but traditionally the Republicans have stated a winner-take-all situation when it comes to delegating or handing out pledged delegates that will go to the National Convention.